Thank you, Jean, for those inspiring words and great pictures. And thank you to all of you for coming, and especially thank you to the Harvard-Westlake Parents Association, who stood up en masse to show us just how much you're giving to the school. It really is quite something to show up at a faculty appreciation lunch or to an event like this and to recognize just how much you all are doing. So thank you. My subject tonight, as Jean mentioned, is the mission of Harvard-Westlake, which is a big topic that I intend to approach in three parts. The first part is a bit oblique, so bear with me as I describe one of my memorable experiences from this past summer, which was seeing the Book of Mormon on Broadway. For more than a year, the lead role has been played by Ben Platt, who graduated from Harvard-Westlake in 2011 and whose mother, I believe, is in the audience tonight. After his first semester at Columbia, Ben was cast in the Chicago production, and a year later, he was cast in the lead on Broadway. Even his mother, I think, had to agree that that was a decent reason to postpone the remainder of freshman year. With Ben's help, we got a block of 50 tickets and invited New York area alumni to come together and see the show and join Ben afterwards for a private Q&A. Now, if you've seen the Book of Mormon or heard about it, you know it was written by the creators of the TV sitcom South Park. I have watched South Park once or twice, but never all the way through, because I have to admit it's too much for me. It's too irreverent, it's too crude, and it's too caustic. I was warned that the Book of Mormon would be caustic too, but I assumed its irreverence would be in its satire of Mormonism, and perhaps because I'm not Mormon, I never minded when New York Times columnist Gail Collins made relentless fun of Mitt Romney's religious piety during the 2012 presidential campaign. So how bad could it be? Perhaps you've seen the show. If not, the basic plot is this. Ben's character, Elder Cunningham, and his straight-laced, all-American, Romney-like missionary partner are sent on their Mormon mission to a remote Ugandan village, showing up in white shirts and tightly knotted ties with a mission of converting the villagers to a religion which the musical's early numbers portray as utterly absurd. When they arrive in Uganda, the young missionaries are shocked by the aggressive blasphemy and scorching profanity of the villagers whose souls they have come to save, and they are rendered speechless by a focus on all things sexual and genital. I found myself empathizing rather deeply with the missionaries. The very name of one character is a violent use of the F word, and it was quite unsettling to hear gorgeous Broadway voices singing cheery show tunes about maggots in very sensitive places. And I'm telling you, there are no euphemisms in this show. With his usual thoughtfulness, Ed Hu had seated me next to a Westlake graduate from the class of 1960. With the idea that she and I would have a charming time together. He let me know that she had been quite generous to our school over the years, so here was a nice opportunity for the two of us to get to know one another better. She and I did have a pleasant chat while we waited for the show to begin, talking mostly about how important it is for our school to focus on personal decorum and other timeless virtues. From the very first musical number, I was dreading intermission. Scene after scene, song after song, blasphemy, profanity, gratuitous sexuality. Perhaps my theater companion was better prepared for it than I was. Or I found myself secretly wishing perhaps she's less of a prude. As the curtain closed, I clapped politely for yet another lovely song with lyrics that would have landed one of our students in 2 weeks of suspension and a series of prayer meetings with Father Jay. The lights came up, she turned to me, and with an expression that betrayed absolutely nothing of her own opinion, she said, "So, What did you think? I searched her eyes for a clue. Did she love it? Or did she loathe it? It was a joy to watch Ben act and hear him sing, and I certainly felt great institutional pride in his talent and accomplishment. But was she pleased that Harvard-Westlake had brought her to something that was so clever in its critique of conventional reverence, or was she mortified at having to participate in such filth, furious at what Westlake School had become, and disgusted whenever she heard me involuntarily snickering at something raunchy? I should have answered her with something like, "It's quite a show and I'm still processing it. How about you?" That would have been simple, non-committal, would have been true. Instead, I don't know why I said that I found it to be emotionally confusing. After a long and awkward pause that she chose not to rescue, I launched into a rambling description of my grandfather, the Baptist minister who preached about the evils of tobacco and then leaned out his window at midnight smoking cigarettes. I do not know what my grandfather's cigarettes have to do with the Book of Mormon. And as for my theater companion's reaction to the show, I don't know about that either. After hearing me ramble about my family vices for a few more awkward minutes, understandably, she excused herself to go and get a drink, returning just as the curtain was rising for Act 2. When the show ended an hour later, and the waves of applause had subsided, she briskly thanked me, said that Mr. Platt was certainly a talented young man, and she wished she could stay for his talk, but she must be on her way. I think I managed to bid her adieu without another word about my emotional confusion. But it was definitely there. I'm not sure whether I would sit through that show again, though Ben's performance was breathtaking. But I am sure that the Book of Mormon isn't really about Mormonism. I mean the show, not the book. The show's genius, I think, is how it turns quite cleverly in the second act from satire to a sincerity that subverts all the mockery that has come before. The most irreverent show I have ever seen somehow ultimately takes the unlikely position that there is tremendous and transformative power in believing in something. Spoiler alert, but let me tell you how this happens in the show. Ben's character, Elder Cunningham, is a needy nerd who does not care about Mormonism or his mission. Elder Price, his Romney-like missionary partner, is full of confidence and charisma and expects to convert and save the world, but when Mormonism does not engage the villagers and has no apparent relevance to their struggles with poverty, AIDS, and the local warlord, Elder Price gives up and leaves. The twist comes when Ben's character encounters the surprising readiness of one young woman in the village to believe in the Mormon story. She asks him to teach her about the Book of Mormon, which he has never actually read. He wants to please her. It is, after all, his mission to talk about Mormonism, so he just makes stuff up. He adds characters from Star Wars to the Mormon story, and then links the bizarre narrative to the challenges of living in the village. His made-up version is exciting and relevant, and it becomes the villagers' source of hope, their source of belief in better things to come. They anoint him as their spiritual leader and ask him to baptize them. The villagers' commitment to this Star Wars Mormonism is, as you would expect, a source of much hilarity in the second act. However, just as the show seems to have reduced the villagers to fools, manipulated by a fantasy that they will eventually discover is just made up by someone who hasn't even read the book, one of them says, half to the audience, that they have understood all along that the stories are just metaphors. All's well that ends well when the evil warlord also converts to the Star Wars Mormonism of our hero, and the villagers are truly saved. The brilliance of this show is that it makes missionary zeal and unquestioning belief look absolutely absurd, and then it cuts back against its own irreverence by bringing the story around to a quite moving statement about the power of community believing in something together. If you didn't see the segue coming, and I admit I have been digressing a bit, there it is, the power of a community believing in something together. Which brings me at long last to the mission statement of Harvard-Westlake. Thank you, Tim. You might have been hoping that I was going to show you the scenes from the Book of Mormon that made me the most uncomfortable. Quite the opposite, I'm afraid. I am going to take you through this mission statement, how we built it, and how I hope that we can believe in it together. A new statement of Harvard-Westlake's mission. That's deliberate phrasing, because it is not, in fact, a new mission. It's a new statement of an enduring mission. With new emphasis, it's shorter and it's more memorable, but it is an expression of Harvard-Westlake's enduring mission. It was drafted last spring by a group of 12 people that I pulled together and called the MAP Committee, the Mission and Planning Committee. And it was drafted from numerous conversations that I and they were having with many, many people in our community, students and faculty and staff and parents and alumni. You might remember that last year I had 4 days of Krispy Kreme donuts out for the middle school students while we talked about the mission, and then I went over to the upper school and did the same thing with Sprinkles cupcakes. We didn't offer cupcakes and donuts to every constituent group, but we had conversations with everyone about our school, about what makes it tick, about what makes Harvard-Westlake who we are. We brought what we were doing in drafting the mission statement before the Planning Committee of the Board of Trustees, and eventually, in June, before the full Board of Trustees, got their guidance and assistance, and brought a final draft to the board in late June, which received unanimous approval. In those conversations that I was having throughout last year, my first year at the school, with so many different people in our community, I was asking about Harvard-Westlake's identity. And 4 themes emerged very prominently. The first theme is community. People wanted to talk to me about the community of Harvard-Westlake and how strong it was at events like homecoming, how strong it was at Harvard-Westlake Parents Association events like the gala or like party book events. They wanted to talk about how there were affinity groups, multicultural affinity groups, groups that were affiliated with a team that had such strong community that it was really a key part, and a surprising part, in fact, of our school, given the challenges that we have to be a community when we have almost 1,600 students who come from almost 200 different zip codes and are located on 2 different campuses. With that kind of diversity and that kind of geographic spread, it's difficult to be a community. But it was very important to people, and it emerged as one of the 4 key themes. The word excellence is the word I think I heard most when I asked about Harvard-Westlake. When I spoke to students or parents or alumni or faculty, the word excellence emerged. And it truly is extraordinary. I don't have to tell you about the academic and artistic and athletic and journalistic and forensic and musical excellence that our institution can boast. It's really quite extraordinary. It's part of what drew me back to this school. It's part of what has drawn you and your children to the school. It's what makes faculty so proud to teach here. And it is core to our identity. It is also, of course, and in many conversations this emerged, a source of one of our great challenges, the pressure that our students feel to succeed. So like community, one of the themes that has so much pride but also some concern given our challenges, I think that was true of excellence as well. Tremendous pride, justifiable pride in our excellence, and some concern about what comes along with it. The third theme is integrity. People would talk in various ways about character, about honesty, about self-discipline, and we landed on this word as an expression of what we were hearing because people talked often about moral behavior on one, or moral perspective on one side and then behavioral on the other. People would talk about being honest or being kind, and then people would talk about self-discipline and achieving one's full self, being complete. And we like the word integrity as one that implies both the honesty and the moral uprightness, and also a sort of completeness. A bringing together and integrating, if you will, of being one's best self and doing with it what is right. The word integrity implies those things and seem to us to be less cliched than the word character and more purposeful in its expression. The last theme was purpose. People know that Harvard-Westlake students are motivated, self-disciplined, set goals for themselves in ways that are unusual for students in high school and middle school. That's true of our faculty as well. It's true of our institution. We're an institution that set out 10 years ago to build a new school. And look at what we have got here at this middle school. It's really quite extraordinary what the school has been able to do by being purposeful. When people talked about Harvard-Westlake's purpose, again, justifiable pride, sometimes the question about whether our students, in their purposes, are too inward in their focus. And I think we have to look at the institution that way as well. Are we, as an institution, sometimes in our purposes more inwardly focused than we should be? These four themes, when we turn to aspirations, come again, but they come with words around them. With regard to community, diverse and inclusive community, we don't want to just be diverse. We don't want to be just a place where students and faculty and parents come from everywhere, come from backgrounds that are different and perspectives that are different. We want to work at being inclusive. We aspire to be a place where everyone feels like she or he belongs and where everyone feels that this is a place that is home. With regard to excellence, the theme, as I mentioned, of excellence having that underside of too much focus on outcome led us to the pursuit of excellence, really an echo of what Carol Dweck has famously called the growth mindset. And as many of you know, she came and spoke with faculty and staff and parents last year, and we were taken as a community with the idea that our excellence needs to be about the process more than the outcome. We need to be pursuing excellence. With integrity, we found the words living and learning. We don't want the integrity that our students aspire to be just about what they do in school. We want it to be about what they do when they are away from school and what they do when they are beyond our school, when they have grown past senior year. We want that integration of what one is capable of and what one knows is right to be not just in the learning, but also in the living. And finally, purpose, the purpose beyond ourselves, gets to that idea that we as an institution can be too inwardly focused, and we know that our students, in their purposes, in their goals, in their orientation, so furiously and sometimes narrowly on outcome, can lose a sense of purpose beyond themselves. There's a missing spot up there, and there's a very important word that goes into that spot, the word joyful. And when I use that word, and when we thought of that word, we don't want to suggest that the joyful pursuit of excellence is all about butterflies and balloons and birthday cake, although we do hope that there is room for all of those things at our school. We want to imply and suggest passion and a sense of fulfillment in that pursuit of excellence. We all know what that feels like. Everyone in this auditorium knows what it can feel like to be involved in an activity and so taken with what the positive psychology movement has called the flow of the experience that it is joyful. And that's something that we aspire to as an institution and feel, as I put it in convocations, in the convocation ceremony, is something we need to hold ourselves accountable to. When our pursuit of excellence becomes joyless, it is contrary to our mission. So the mission statement takes those four phrases and brings them this way. Harvard-Westlake strives to be a diverse and inclusive community united by three things: the joyful pursuit of educational excellence, living and learning with integrity, and purpose beyond ourselves. You see those four pillars: community, excellence, integrity, and purpose, four pillars of our identity. And one of my colleagues noticed that there is an opportunity to use the word epic to remember them. Epic, excellence, purpose, integrity, and community. They don't go in order, but it helps to remember. Those are the pillars of the statement, but I think the aspirational words are actually these 8 words: diverse, inclusive, joyful pursuit, living, learning, beyond ourselves. I think those words are the heart of the statement, and they are aspirational. They come after the words strives to be, which is an acknowledgement that this will be a striving that I think will forever be the experience of Harvard-Westlake School. We will always be striving for these things, sometimes falling short, but I hope holding them as aspirations. I want to show you the previous mission statement that when I encountered it for the first time, I couldn't remember, and when I asked my colleagues what it was, none of them could remember except Jean, who had a little bit of it. I don't think Jean got all of it, but Jean had most of it. It's a long statement. This is the previous mission statement of Harvard-Westlake. Harvard-Westlake is a school whose curriculum and programs create an educational environment designed for students who possess both the motivation and the ability to pursue a rigorous college preparatory course of study. The school strives to provide an education that enables and empowers its diverse students to develop their intellectual, spiritual, emotional, and physical gifts, to understand and respect the similarities and differences among themselves and others in their local and world communities, and to learn the habits of mind and self-discipline necessary to live with integrity and purpose as contributing members of society. That is 96 words. Our new statement is just a little more than a quarter the size of this one. But something that's interesting is that we didn't use this statement in devising the new statement. We never had this before us. The MAP committee never laid this statement out when we were talking about those elements of our identity and our aspiration. But look at these words that I've put in red: educational, pursue, the school strives, diverse, community, live with integrity and purpose. I was stunned when I went back to it and I saw that phrase, live with integrity and purpose, because that's not something that we were looking at when we came up with living and learning with integrity and purpose beyond ourselves. So this is why I say it is an enduring mission, but a new statement of it. And there's the new statement. Harvard-Westlake strives to be a diverse and inclusive community united by the joyful pursuit of excellence, living and learning with integrity and purpose beyond ourselves. With that on the screen, for the last part of my talk, I want to describe a funeral that I attended last Saturday night after the middle school back-to-school day. I know a few of you in the audience were there. It was a celebration of the life of Dr. James Maloney, grandfather of 2 current students, father of 3 alumni, and former chairman of our board. Of the many moving aspects of this service, what will stay with me a long, long time is the 3 extraordinary eulogies given by each of Dr. Maloney's 3 sons, 3 graduates of our school, who displayed the profound influence their father had long after the time we typically refer to as the time of raising kids. The youngest son, in his 40s now, focused on the letters his father had written to him over the years. He held up a frayed folder stuffed with yellowed sheets of paper and said with understandable emotion in his voice, "Here they are, Dad. I have them all." Then he read one of them to us, and it was clear why he had kept them. The middle son, a doctor like his father, focused on the advice he had heard from his dad when his dad was speaking to a room full of medical residents on how to enter an examination room when a patient is waiting. "Look around," his father told the young doctors, "and find something the patient has brought with him or her, because what the patient brings to the doctor's office is almost always significant. It might be a photograph of grandchildren, a well-worn baseball cap, a rosary. Begin the examination there," his father had said. "Tell me about your grandchildren, Mrs. Jones. Is that your hometown team, Mr. Jones? I see your rosary there. Are you a religious person?" This way, he said, the patient becomes a human being rather than a medical condition, and the typical barriers of status or race or gender or even just anxiety fade away. The younger Dr. Maloney said his professional life was shaped by that approach to the practice of medicine. And the eldest son, A current Harvard Westlake parent and also a physician spoke stirringly about the lessons he had learned from witnessing his father live his life by strongly held values. He shared a number of anecdotes and then concluded with this: I suspect many of you recognize Jim Maloney in these stories, in part because you knew him, but also in part because your father was like him, or your grandfather was like him, or maybe you are like him. His generation came of age in the Great Depression. Instead of dancing the swing and kissing under the stars, they spent their youth fighting and dying to save America and the world. Their legacy to us is not just this country, but their values of trustworthiness, hard work, and self-sacrifice. Remarkable words. And I don't think it's just a coincidence that there's such an echo of Gene's wonderful words moments ago. And what an influence on the values of his children, long after the time when we might tell ourselves with a rueful shrug that our children aren't listening to us anymore, don't care about what matters to us, don't notice who we truly are. Long after we might be thinking that our jobs as parents are nearly done. Our children may well be absorbing the most critical and lasting lessons from us. How we conduct our professional lives and what our children hear us saying about them to others is a powerful and hugely influential source of role modeling. The sacrifices we make for our families, the efforts we make to improve our communities and our world, those purposes beyond ourselves, I believe our children are absorbing them in much more deep ways and being affected by them far more lastingly than by our efforts to helicopter around their activities and improve their college admission prospects. And let's agree to write letters to our children about what matters most to us. They won't keep our texts and emails, won't remember the point of our long talks in the car or at the kitchen table, but I bet they'll keep the letter that arrives in their mailbox at camp or at college. Or why not? At home. At home, with a full name and a full address on the envelope, mailed from a business trip or a visit to a distant relative, or even just a mailbox down the street. Who knows how many times they might read a good letter from you. It's the opposite of helicopter parenting. It's parenting that comes from an intimate distance and lets them choose when and how often and how much to be affected by it. So here's my point, and I promise that I will end with this. The mission I have shared with you and have been sharing repeatedly with the school community this fall, this expression of what we hope will characterize the education you've chosen for your children, whether it's for one more year or for 6, please don't let me be the only missionary. The message of the Book of Mormon, once you get past the profanity and the blasphemy and anxiety about the future generosity of the graduate from 1960, is that the mission, the words to live by, come alive when they are made relevant through the power of people believing in them together. And the mission of Harvard Westlake isn't the Star Wars silliness that Ben Platt spins into gold every night on Broadway. It's what you chose already for your children's education. And it might just help in making the next greatest generation. For the mission to have its effect, we have to be partners. Share with your children how you have found joy in the pursuit of excellence, how you have lived with integrity, how you are committed to purposes beyond yourself. Show them, tell them, write letters to them that reveal who you are, what you believe, and why. Your children are unusually good at living up to expectations. They're experts at it. That's why we admitted them. And the expectations here convinced you that Harvard Westlake was the best school for them. So let's make our expectations clear together. Diverse and inclusive community, joyful pursuit of excellence, living and learning with integrity, purpose beyond ourselves. Spoken in unison by all of us, these expectations will become your children's values. And your children will, I believe, like Gene does, make a meaningful difference in the world. That concludes our presentations. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for all you do to support Harvard Westlake. Good night.